You're listening to Bigfoot Society podcast, hosted by our captain, Jeremiah Byron, where it's all Bigfoot all the time. Have you ever had the urge to do more, to be more? Now you can by joining Bigfoot Society on the Patreon. Get ad-free episodes and even member-only episodes. Take part in movie night and even live video chats. Interact behind the scenes with Jeremiah and other Patreon members like me, Leia. The powerful podcast goes on, and you may contribute a verse in our Patreon community. Carpe diem. Seize the day, Bigfooters, and make your lives extraordinary.
Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Melanie today. Melanie is an individual that I've been talking to for quite a while, and she's experienced some really interesting things over the years, Sasquatch and many, many other things. And it's a privilege to have you on the show, Melanie.
It's a privilege to be on your show, Jeremiah.
So, Melanie, we've got only a certain amount of time, so I'm going to let you go ahead and take us back to where we need to be, what we need to know, where we're at, and I'm going to let you start sharing your story today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I'd like to start by saying I grew up in a really rural little town in Ohio, Northeast Ohio, and it was all woods and farms. And from the age of 4, I lived in the woods. I was there from morning till it got dark. And I am so surprised that I never encountered anything. It was all woods, and there were ponds. It was just, and I was there all the time. But I think it's because I'm a little hyper. I was a very hyperactive child, and I talked to myself all the time. So they may have been watching me, but I just never shut up enough to notice them. So then I got married, and my husband and I moved to another little rural township, even in Northeast Ohio, that had one traffic light that was a flashing light, and it was nothing but railroad tracks and acres, and it was all woods. 3 or 4 lakes came together in this area, and it was just a very, very country town. So who we rented from, my landlady's brother used to come over all the time. He was a little out there. He was like in the woods all the time. He found arrowheads, and he was always finding things. And so one day he came over and he said, "Would you like to see some human bones?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, I found some human bones, and I gathered them up and I put them by a tree. You want to see them?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So we went down the road, and there was a path that you could drive on, but it was really bumpy and crazy, that went a mile back into the woods along the railroad tracks. There were 3 oil wells, and I guess the road was there so they could check the wells, but it was just thick with woods. I mean, they went on forever. So we went back there, and at the 3rd oil well, we went off to the left, and he took me up on this hill. There was like a hill back there, and he said, "This is the Indian burial mound." And I knew the town had been full of Indians. And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I'm going to find the tree." So he said, I made an X with a hatchet in the tree. And I said, "Well, how long ago was this?" And he said, "Oh, it's been like 8 years." And I'm thinking, "Oh, we're never going to find that X. That tree grew." Well, damned if I didn't find that X in that tree, and it was way up. So he dug at the base of it, and damned if he didn't pull out a handful of bones, like finger bones. And I said, his name was Jimmy. I said, "Jimmy, you can't do this. this is the sacred ground. You got to put these back where, like, you can't do this. So, he laughed at that. I don't know. It was just kind of crazy. I had never been to an Indian burial mound. But anyway, a couple of days later, I thought, I'm going to go back there and see what's past that. Now, I got to back up for just a second. When I grew up, my mom and dad were young, and my dad he was like hip to everything. He was into all kinds of crazy, like I played with mercury when I was a kid, and he just was always telling me different things. But for some strange reason, I never saw the Patterson-Gimlin film. I never heard of Bigfoot. When I moved to this little town, I had never heard of, experienced, or knew anything about Sasquatch or any cryptids or anything. So I was just totally blank on all of it. Well, okay, so I go back there, walk back there, went over the mound, and when I got over the mound, it was real thick trees, and off to my left, there was these trees that were like, oh my God, they had to have been 30, 40 feet tall, but they were just like bare trees, and they made a perfect X. Well, I didn't know anything about X's or whatever, but I thought that was really cool. Like, oh my God, those trees fell and made an X. Well, I kept going past the X, and all of a sudden, I came into a clearing that was the back end of one of the lakes, and one of the creeks was there. That at the back of this clearing, the lakes were there. It was like all swampy and ponds, and the first thing I noticed was there was I'm going to call it a corral. I don't know what else to call it. It was a half moon shape. It was oh my God! If it was straightened out, it would probably be, oh my goodness, 50 feet long, maybe a little more. And it was made out of long 20, 30-foot trees that had been stripped down, and they were intertwined at the ends, and they were stacked 3 and 4 feet high. And I was looking at that, and I thought, oh, I've never seen anything like that before. Now, this was a place, people don't go back there. There's nobody that goes back there. So I knew it wasn't made by people, and all of a sudden I started thinking, oh my God. Because I had heard about Sasquatch, but never knew anything about it. And I thought, this is like a habitat for something. And that corral has to be, I figured it was either now it was right, like there was back of the lake, there was an area with all kinds of structures, tree structures. And then before that area was this corral. And I thought, well, maybe either run deer into this. Something runs deer into this. I had no idea, but it was made nice. It was beautiful. So I looked around in there, and I mean, some of these tree structures were just incredible. Still didn't quite know what I was looking at. So fast forward, I went back there a lot, and I decided, well, what I'm going to do, because I had Googled it and looked up online, and it said that, like a Sasquatch area. And I thought, oh, cool, I'll bring him some food. So I had an old potato sack, and I would put, I don't know, meat, like dried meat and fruit and vegetables and nuts and stuff in it. And I would take it back there, and I would hang it in a tree. And I did that probably every 3 or 4 days. And it was always taken down and sat on the ground and empty. Well, while we lived there, I'm going to kind of add in the other things that I have encountered and experienced, because this covers like years and years in 3 different areas. So I worked at a horse farm where it had a racetrack, and the guy was the sulky riders, the trotters. And so I would work, oh my God, that first work is hard. I would work from 6 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, and I'd go home, take a shower, go back to work, load up the horses, and we'd head to the racetrack. By the time we got back, it was like 12:31. I'd have to be back there at 6. So the guy I was dating lived not too far from there, and I lived probably 30 minutes away. So I called my daughter, and at this point, she was about 14, 15, and I told her I'm just going to stay at his house because it's closer. I could just zip back to work, and I'll see you tomorrow. Well, 4 o'clock in the morning, my phone rings, 4 or 5, I don't know. And it's my daughter. And she said, Mom, you got to come home. And I said, what's up, bud? And she said, you have to come home. And I said, oh, and she's a teenager, right? And like she had all these teenage friends. And I said, what did they do? You know, I said, Mommy, are the police involved? She said, no. I said, neighbors? She said, no, Mom, you just got to come see this. So I got in the car, I went home, and I came in the front door, and she said, come out back with me. Now, this house was also surrounded by woods, and the train tracks back where that habitat is was just right down the road and back in a mile. So she took me out back, and we had this big fenced-in area, probably 30 by 30 feet, where our dogs were. You know, they were out there all night. They were always out there. And there were these 3 gigantic catalpa trees, which are these giant trees that grow straight as an arrow up. Maybe they're high. They must be probably 50 feet, 80 feet. I don't know. Well, at the base of one of them, she took me over, and there was a footprint, like maybe 3 feet out from the base of this tree. And like, at first I couldn't determine it as a footprint because it had like 5 toes or four toes, and you could almost see a 5th with claws at the end of them. But it was almost like something was walking on the ball of its foot. There, you know, the heel was just like this little tiny mark. So these went from that tree down the yard towards the road, maybe every like 5 feet from each other. So the first one started at the base of the tree, and that was the left one. Then the right one was 5 feet away. Then the left one again was 5 feet away. And I'm looking at that, and I said, Molly, I don't know what these are. And she said, Mom, she said, last night the dogs went ballistic. She was home alone, and her bedroom was up on the 2nd floor. In one of the trees, this tree was like right outside her bedroom window. So it's blowing my mind. Like, what are these, Molly? So we're looking at them, and they went down the driveway towards the road. Then they turned, and they went back up the yard to the dog fence. And at the dog fence, they like shuffled back and forth. And then after that, they proceeded on down the driveway, across the road and into the woods. And I'm sorry, I forgot to say, it was winter, and there was like 8 inches of snow on the ground. So that's how we could see the tracks. So she said she was terrified. She looked out her window, but she was scared to death to go out look in the backyard. So I'm thinking it was a Dogman because I sent the pictures to some researcher friends of mine, and they said those are definitely Dogman tracks. So it must have been up in the tree watching her through her window, and then just jumped down out of the tree. So the next thing that happened there, my grandkids came to live with me, and they were, what were they? They were like 3 and 6, maybe a little younger, maybe a little older. I'm not sure. But so I would take them on deer rides. There were all these backcountry roads, and we loved to go for deer rides. So we'd get in the van, and Destiny, my granddaughter, she'd sit beside me, and Bobby'd sit behind us. And so we started doing these rides. So we went this one time. If you go down this one long road where it's all just farms and woods, there's the lake is on your left, and then there's a little, I don't even know why they put this in, but there's like a little loop road on the right that just goes in a loop, comes right back to the road. There's no electric back there. I don't know what they put it in for, what it was for, but so we drove back that. Well, we got a little ways up it, and then this little deer, it wasn't a big deer, came flying out in front of us. Now, this is like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. This little deer just came flying out across the road through that little bit of woods heading towards the lake. And I said to my granddaughter, I said, now, where do you think he thinks he's going? Because there's only the road and the lake, there. And I'm pondering this. I'm looking to see if I could see him. And my granddaughter starts screaming, Grammy, you gotta go, go. And I looked at her and I said, honey, what does it matter? She said, you just gotta go. And she's crying. So I looked where she was looking to the left, and it was kind of a field, but there were trees at the edge. And about, oh my God, like 12 feet up, 10 feet up, and in these trees were these 2 red two red, like glowing circles. And so I'm looking at him, and she's freaking out. And I said, I'm thinking to myself, there's no electric, there's no, like, it can't be lights or, so I'm thinking, an owl or raccoon? No, they were big and far apart. And by now, my grandson was crying. All of a sudden, Jeremiah, they closed and opened again. And that was it. That I knew it. After seeing that habitat, thinking what I had been thinking, everything. It was like, oh my God, that's got to be a Sasquatch. I got out of there. Well, so another thing that happened there one night, I was going for a deer ride with my granddaughter. My grandson was sleeping. So we went for a deer ride, and it was probably 10:30 at night. And we're going down this one road, Virginia it's called, and there was, to the right is the back end of a Christmas tree farm. And beyond, it's surrounded by that. It's nothing but woods as far as you can think. And on the other side of the road, on the left, it was all woods. But all of a sudden, out of the back of this Christmas tree farm comes this big, I mean big, black, I would have said wolf, except we really didn't have wolves around there. This thing was solid black. And it was kind of, I'm gonna use the word loping, because it was like loping, out of the trees, and its tongue was hanging out the side, and it must have been back there hunting, is what I figured. But it was like at least 7 feet long. It was on all fours, didn't have the tail, and I didn't see its teeth or anything. It never looked towards us, but its eyes. Now we're sitting in my van, and my lights are on it, and it's only maybe 10 feet in front of us, so I could see its eyes were looking at us, and I swear to God, its lips went up in a smirk. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like a smirk, and it I couldn't stop looking at its back legs. Like everybody says, Dogman, their front legs are longer. Well, this guy had his back legs were long, and they were weird looking. It almost looked like they had an extra joint in them. So I'm just focused on these back legs and the fact this thing doesn't have a tail, and it's just it was just creepy. And we were so scared, and it went across the road. It went off into the woods on the other side of the road. I instantly got so sick. The feeling I had was like death, like I was going to die. I had never felt anything like that before. It was the most dreadful, sickening feeling I had ever had. One Easter, this is after all these different things happened. It was Easter night, and a friend of mine and my daughter and I were sitting. I had this big 4-story, scary-looking old house, and there was a sidewalk across the street, and it went up a hill, and this road was just kind of a little back road. And we were sitting on my porch, and we saw this woman and these two little girls, and they were dressed in beautiful clothes, but very old-fashioned, really old-fashioned, high collars and the dresses, and they looked out of place. So we're watching them, and they're walking up the sidewalk, and the little girls each had a doll in their hands, in their arm, but these dolls had no face. They were like floppy drag dolls with no face on them. And the mom was holding their hands, and she's talking back and forth to each of them, and they're all laughing and smiling. And we're all, me and my daughter and my friend are like, this is weird. Who are these people? What is this all about? Well, they proceeded to, they never looked over at us. They were in their own little place. They walked up the hill, the sidewalk up the hill, and then they just disappeared. Couldn't see them anymore. Well, at the top of the hill, back in the early 1900s, the house up there used to be the mortuary or the funeral home, and we were just shocked. So I think they were ghosts. I think they just a lot of people in that town told me they'd seen visions of Indians riding horses through the streets, and there's a lot of old mines in this town. It's a very, very I would love to go back there with somebody someday and go to these mines and just see if we can't find some things out. The teenagers in that town saw now I don't know if I want to call it a rake or a trawler. It's kind of confusing as to which is which, but they came to the house, and these were like the younger brothers of my daughter's friends who were always at the house, and they were freaking out, and they said they went over the bridge where the creek is, and back in the creek, up in the tree, they saw this white thing that was just all like long white arms and long white legs, like wrapped around the top of the tree. Then we ended up having to move, and my husband got us a place in the city. I hate the city. I'm not a city girl. I hated everything about it. So we lived there for, oh my God, 9 years. Well, the second year we lived there, I thought, I'm a fisherman. I fish all the time. Like I would get the kids on the bus, go to the lake, come home, get the kids off the bus, fix them a snack, go back to the lake. So they all know how to fish. But when we moved, I was like, screw it, I got to find a place to fish. So I just Googled it, and just 14 minutes away was a reservoir that I remembered as a child. We had stayed there in the campground. So I thought, oh, that is really cool. So I started fishing there all the time. So one day I went, and it was like you go into this park, you go down this little back road, go into this parking lot, and there was one dock, little wooden dock, and then all the shore, and that people would fish there. People would put their boats out on this little dock, and it was a cove. So across, it was maybe, I don't know, 200 yards across, maybe not that much. That was all woods, and that went into Never Never Land. And then it went maybe, I don't know, like 100 yards to the right, and it turned, and that was like the swamp part, and then come up, and that's where we'd fish. So I'm fishing, and it was probably 4:30. About 7, all the boats started coming in. And then it got a little later because there were a bunch of boats coming in there, and it got dark. Well, as it got dark and these boats were waiting to get off the dock, there was one boat that was like drift casting the shore across from me, and all of a sudden they threw it in reverse and went back like 20 feet and hit a spotlight, and we're spotlighting the woods, and I'm standing there, I'm thinking, what did they see or hear? So I'm trying to pay attention to them because I'm going to ask them about this. Well, in the mass of boats that were coming in, this one little dock, I lost them. So I never got to ask them. But I stayed there fishing, and it was probably 10:30. I think it was like 10:30 at night. Everybody's gone. Now, this is back in the woods at this little cove. I'm the only one there. And all of a sudden, across the lake, across the cove, and off to my right, it sounded like there was a combine coming through the woods. Trees were cracking and falling. It was like the most destructive thing I had ever heard. And instantly, now, I will tell you, like, I drink when I fish, but I wasn't drunk. I couldn't, like, connect with what it was instantly. So I'm thinking, what in the hell is the city doing out here tearing the woods down at this time of night? And I mean, it was total destruction going on. So I listened to it, and I'm thinking, and then it dawned on me, this isn't the city. This isn't the city doing this. This is something that wants the lake, and here I sit with my lanterns fishing. So I wait, I listened to it for about 20 more minutes, and then I thought, okay, I'm gonna, whatever, I don't know what this is, but I'm gonna give it its time so it can eat, hunt, or whatever it does. And so I walked back up to the parking lot, got my car, drove back down to where I was, loaded up, and left. Well, the next morning, I went to the other side, and there's a little parking lot there, and I could see the dock, and I could see where I was standing, and I knew where I heard the noise. So I started walking down into the woods, and it didn't take me but a minute. Well, back up a minute. When I walked into those woods, there was the carcass of a dead deer laying right there, like right there. Its head was gone. Excuse me. Its belly was ripped open. none of the meat was gone, but all of its insides were gone, and its legs were broken between like its knee and ankle. And they were broken there, like all four of them were broken there. And I thought, well, that's really creepy. Who would do this? So I went on down, I walked, and instantly I saw the spot that I heard all of this destruction. And it was crazy. It looked like a tornado. Now, that night, the night before, there had been no wind. It was July. It was a warm, calm night. There was no wind, no anything. This looked like a tornado had hit. The trees were it was probably a 30 by 20 foot area. These big trees were just cracked, like 8 feet up, 6 feet up, 10 feet up, just cracked. Some of them were thrown into the tops of other trees. There was just pieces of trees all over the ground. Some of them looked like they had been stomped on. They were like, smashed and sawdust from them. And it was incredible. And the feeling I had was like, wow, I never heard a sound, never heard any sounds, but instantly I knew what it was. So I decided, that's it, I want to know about these things. So I started investigating this area. Well, so I would bring food back there because I always heard you should leave them gifts, which now I know you shouldn't. But I had a cheesecake I had bought for my husband, and he had 3 pieces left in it, and it was in a round plastic container with a round lid on top. And I found this tree that had been cracked, had fallen, and I put it way up on the highest part of the tree. And I left, and I came back the next day, and the whole container was gone. And I thought, well, it has to be raccoons, So I searched like 50 feet around this tree. I could not find that container anywhere. So I thought, well, they just took it to the lake. Who knows? But so the next day I went back, and Jeremiah, that container was sitting exactly where I had put it originally on that tree, empty with the lid beside it. Now, I have no idea what kind of animal would do that other than the Sasquatch. And I don't call him Bigfoot because that just seems kind of disrespectful to me, so I call him Sasquatch. So there was that, and then I'm into it. Now I'm going to figure out what's going on back here. So I started setting up a game cam and recorders back there. Well, there was one area where there were 2 gigantic trees that had fallen, and they made like an L, like the one's base and the other one's base. One went off one direction, the other one was like a 90-degree angle to that. And for some reason, that just really drew me there. So there were little trees around it. So I would take things and I would hang them in these little trees right by it. And a little red toy car, I put one, and I put candy bars or whatever up there. I came back there one day, and now it was, I'm going to say it was maybe October, November. It was, chilly. And right in between the 90-degree angle of these trees was a bare footprint. It wasn't huge. It was maybe 7-8 inches long, and it wasn't wide. It just looked like a human's bare footprint, only one. But it was long, and the heel, it was like, the middle of it was kind of narrow and long, and the heel was just really narrow. So I took a picture of it. I sent it to my researcher friends, and they all said that's definitely a Dogman track. So I was like, oh boy. So I did find some Bigfoot tracks back in those woods. Not real good ones, but a couple weren't bad. So one night I went back there when it was in the afternoon. I was gonna set my game cam up, and I went back into those woods. And it was the mushrooms were out, and I'm a mushroom hunter. And I got totally sidetracked getting mushrooms. I foraged a bunch of mushrooms, and I realized, boy, it's getting dark. I better find a place to put this game cam. So I went out, and I went real deep into the woods by the lake. And I'm just looking around at trees, wondering what would be a good tree to put this on. All of a sudden, from my right, about 50 feet to my right, was an owl sound. It was like an owl call. But I hear a lot of owl calls because I fish in and I do everything at night, so I hear a lot of owls. This one did not sound like an owl. I mean, it was trying to sound like an owl, but it was loud. It like vibrated my eardrums, and it just like it went off into a different kind of sound at the end of it. Well, immediately from my left, maybe 150 feet in the swamp, was an answering call exactly the same. So I hunkered down, I squatted my legs, and I'm thinking, I don't have a headlamp. All I've got is my phone. I have no knife, no nothing on me. I got a basket of mushrooms and a stick. Well, the one on my left did it again. The one on the right did it again. And I thought, oh my God, they're calling to each other, So, honest to God, Jeremiah, I wish I would have just stayed there so I could have seen them. But I was so scared. I didn't have that dread feeling or anything, but I was scared. So I just quickly booked it right back to my car, through the woods, up the hill, and into my car to get out of there. I wish I would have stayed there. Another thing that happened there, so that reservoir has another part to it, in a different area where there's a dock, and you can rent boats there. It's a long dock. It's probably 50 feet, 70 feet long, and then at the end of it, out in the water, there's a T. It goes out to the left and right. So it was nighttime because I like to catfish at night, and I was out there, and it was dark. It was like midnight, 12:30. I don't know. Nobody was there. And there's like a parking lot, but all the way around this thing is nothing but woods, deep woods. So I'm out on the tee at the left, and I'm standing out there and I'm fishing. All of a sudden, from my left in the woods, I hear this crashing coming. And I'm thinking, well, what was that? And it's crash. All of a sudden, the biggest doe I've ever seen in my life dove out of those woods into the lake and swam like a freight train across that whole lake to the other side. In the meantime, the crashing's still going on. Then it stopped. And I had not heard any coyotes. It wasn't like dogs or coyotes coming through the woods. It was something big. Like something big was chasing this deer. And so I'm standing there, I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I have to walk back by these woods to get to my car. If whatever that is comes out here on the dock, I got to jump in the water. There's nothing else I could do. So that was kind of scary. Let me think what else was over there. So where my husband worked, it was a road that was nothing but factories and stuff. And there were all woods behind them. So I would go mushroom hunting back there. And I foster orphan raccoon babies. And I released a lot of them in that area. So when you release a raccoon baby, for a year, you have to pick food to it. So I'd leave work. I worked with horses. I'd leave. By the time I got to the woods, it was normally dark. So I'd go back in there, and I had certain places that I'd leave because I had like maybe 8 babies I had released back there. Certain places I'd leave food for them. And so then it was fall, and the mushrooms grow on the trees in the fall, and it's like maybe 11 at night. I had a headlamp on, and I'm just kind of walking and looking at the trees, seeing if I see any mushrooms. All of a sudden, something drops. That's the only way I can explain it. From a tree about 20 feet behind me. And when it hit the ground, it jolted me on my feet. Whatever it was so freaking big. Like my feet, my whole body just jolted. And immediately I got that feeling of dread. I got that. I was completely paralyzed. I couldn't hardly breathe. I couldn't move. But it washed over me like a bomb. I was just so terrified, and I could hear it. I could hear it, like not breathing or anything, but I could hear like it in the leaves and the little twigs and stuff. And it seemed like 5 minutes, but it probably wasn't that long. I could finally catch a good breath, and I didn't look behind me. And that's another thing I regret because I wish I would have looked. But I said to it, I'm so sorry. I know this is your home and this is your hunting time. And I swear to you, if you let me, I will walk straight to my car and I will not turn around and I won't look at you. But please let me walk out of here. And so I took a step, started taking really slow steps, never looked behind me, which I regret that too. If I wasn't such a chicken, I would have seen a lot of these creatures. But anyway, so I walked, and I never looked. I walked all the way through the woods to where my car was, and I could hear it walking behind me, but it wasn't walking hard. It was just like real delicate walking. Got in my car and I left. I'll never know what that was, but the feeling I had was Dogman, because that's just a whole different feeling than seeing a Squatch. We moved again. I mean, where we live now, it is up. We are butt up against a 6,050-acre state park, and right behind me, through my yard, through my woods, is the dam to a 3,600-acre lake. So this is like a huge wilderness area back here. I would go driving at night. I didn't think is there anything before. I'd go driving at night and just driving through the park, driving around all the lakes, all the woods, and just seeing what I could see. And it was wintertime. Now there's a picnic area. And of course there's nobody there. It's closed, it's winter, nobody's there. And it was late, it was dark, and I pulled up to where I could see. Behind me were all trees, and then to my left, it was all woods, and it was just woods everywhere. So I stopped my car and I parked it. I turned off all the lights, and I had a really good flashlight, and I had a headlamp that had a red strobe light on it. And like I had told you, that really brings them on, and this is how I found out it did. There was one area in the woods, like this was like another cove part of the lake. There was one area where there was like a tunnel almost that went back into it. So I got the red strobe light out and I started strobing back and forth. Then I'd hit the spotlight. Then I'd strobe back and forth, hit the spotlight. The third time I did it, in this little area that was kind of hollow, like a little clearing, all of a sudden there were probably 12 pairs of eyes, if not more. And like raccoons have a certain color eye. Deer have golden, like yellow eyes. These were all white, like white eye shine. And some of them were high. Some were like medium high. Some were really low to the ground. Now the higher ones, they would, like all of a sudden I wouldn't see their eyes, and then I'd see them. Then I wouldn't get. So they were I think they were ducking behind trees and then looking back out. The littler ones, they just stayed looking. And I thought, oh my God, this is like a community. So there's a lot of sightings back here in this state park. This is like a little community back in here. And I got them all riled up. So I watched them for a little bit, and I had an owl call. I did the owl call and talked to them, and I don't know if they could hear me or not. But so then I left. Well, I came back the next night, and in front of those woods where I had seen all the eyes over to the left, there were these two great big round, it looked like reflectors, like big round red reflectors, real far apart. And they were just, solid, staying there and not doing anything. And I thought, and my flashlight wouldn't reach far enough to show me exactly what that was. So I'm thinking, well, what'd they do? They put there's some grills out there. I don't know what else. They got garbage cans or something out there. And I thought, well, maybe that parking place put some kind of reflectors on something, or I didn't know. I had never seen them before. Well, then they went out and came back on. And it dawned on me, there's something out there. And the red eyes I got the feeling that it was angry. It was angry that I got the whole community upset, and wound up. And I watched it for a while, and it never moved, but boy, it just stared at me. And my thoughts were like, you need to get out of here. I was kind of getting that from it. You need to go. So I did. I left. Well, I waited like 2 days, and I had to go back and see what was going on. So it was, really late. It was probably 11:30, 12. I went back out there, and the eyes were more farther to the left, and they were behind this huge tree. And it was woods, so this one tree kind of stuck out because it was very large. And these eyes were like right beside it. And I'm looking at it, and even with my high powered flashlight, I couldn't get a good look at it. I could kind of see a shape. This thing was big. Whatever it was big. And it was kind of like hunched forward. So it wasn't as tall as it probably was, but it was still pretty tall. And it would go behind the tree, and then it would come out on the other side. And then eventually it started like coming forward, and then it would go back behind the tree and come out the other side, come forward. And the thoughts I was getting were, you got to get out of here. You really, like, this thing is pissed. It's pissed, and it's keeping itself from running at you, because in a state park, they have to kind of maintain, otherwise you're going to have swarms of cops and everybody else there. So I watched it for a little bit, and then it dawned on me, behind me was deeper woods, and I thought, well, I don't want to get caught in a situation between more of them. So I went ahead and left, and I let them alone for a while, because I didn't want to, upset the family or the community. So I'm kind of jumping around on these, but this is all where I live in the place I live now. So one afternoon, my friend from Cleveland came, and behind me is the lake and the dam, and then about maybe a quarter mile up the road to the right is like a state route, and then across from that is a 22,000 acre ammunitions arsenal that is supposedly closed down. It was opened in World War II to make ammunition. My dad worked there. My husband now worked there. A lot of people worked there. But the rumor is now, I forgot to tell you about the UFOs. I'll tell you that when I'm done. But so the rumor now is they built underground facilities there. You see a lot of UFOs around here. So he came from Cleveland, and he had no belief in cryptids at all. He thought I was crazy. And I always told him, I'm not. You'll see someday. So I said, let's go fishing. So we went down right behind me, like a couple miles, is a boat ramp, and the dam is off to the right, and then you can just fish all the way along there. So I threw out it was maybe 7 or 8 o'clock. It was starting to get dark. I threw out a bottom line, tightened it up, and then he and I each threw out a bobber. And we were probably like maybe 15, 20 feet out. And all of a sudden, and we had our headlamps on, each of us had a headlamp. All of a sudden, he said, "Your line." And I looked over, and my bottom line was kind of going back and forth, which was, like if a fish hits it, it's going up and down. So I said, well, there's a lot of big caps and stuff out there, musky and northerns. I said something must have hit the line. So I went, I tightened it up. Nothing was there. So went back for bobber fishing. All of a sudden, this thing rose up from the water, maybe 20 feet out from where our bobbers were. And the only thing I could tell you is it looked like a buoy. It was about the shape of a buoy. I couldn't see a face on it. It was a real dark night, but it was real calm that night. And it rose up, and then it was maybe 1.5 feet tall, maybe 2 feet high out of the water. And then a second one rose up that was maybe, I don't know, like 9, 10 inches tall. It looked exactly the same, only it was a little smaller. And then in front of that one, this little one rose up that was maybe 6 inches high, but looking the same. And they literally stayed in one place. And it was obvious they were watching us. Now, the whole time, my phone was in my back pocket. It never dawned on me to take a picture of them or a video. I was just floored. And he was freaking out because he doesn't believe in anything weird. He's like, what are those things? Why are they in us? It was dark at this point. I'm just mesmerized by him. Well, all of a sudden, the big one just went straight down calmly, Jeremiah, in my headlamp. The water is very clear out there. I could see this huge golden tail. I mean, that's all I could say. It was like a fish tail, but it was probably, I mean, it was long, it was wide, and it just kind of, it was like the tail fin of it was really big, and it never made a ripple in the water. But I could see this tail like move, and then it went down, and then the middle one went down, and the little one went down. They came up again to our left, and same thing, same way they came up, just rose up out of the water, and they stayed there for a while, probably 5 minutes that time, just not doing anything. I could not detect the face on them, but I mean, they had to have had a face of some kind, but with my headlamp, I couldn't see it. And they just stayed there. They were watching us. Then they went down the same way again, the big one, the medium, and then the little one. And they came up one more time, off to our right, like more like towards the dam. And they only stayed there for maybe a minute or two, and then they went down. We didn't see them again. But I think I believe that Arsenal has got things going on there that people don't really know about because it's a government facility. So I'm going to back up. I'm going to take you back to the first place I lived. We had a church beside us. I totally forgot about this. So it was a big parking. The church had this big parking lot. And one night I was just out there, just looking at the sky, and all of a sudden there were like 11 perfectly round, bright orange circles came through the sky. It was a real clear night, and these things were orange, and they were perfectly symmetrically round. And there was one in the front, and then they went by twos all the way back. And I was floored. I knew they were UFOs. I knew they had to be. And they were like in military position, formation. Well, the two by two behind the front one would like switch, and one would go off a little, and then the other one would go over there, and then would come back and get around. Well, I watched them for probably a half an hour across the sky. Then the first one, once it got over, now this is right where the railroad tracks and everything is. As soon as it got back to where the woods started, it literally like Star Wars, like you could see the tracer of it, but it disappeared. 2 by 2, the other ones did the same. They get up to that certain point by where the woods and everything started, and they disappeared, and all of them did that. Also, while we lived in this town, my husband and I, it was real late at night. It was dark. Kids were all in bed, and we had a pool with the trampoline beside it, and we had been swimming in the pool. So we got out and we were just laying on the trampoline looking at the stars, and here came this triangular ship, way up in the sky, not that high up though, and it was a triangle, and right behind it was a military jet with a spotlight on it, and we were like playing there watching this, and the military plane was like following this thing, and this thing's going across the sky. That was kind of freaky. So I do believe in extraterrestrials and UFOs, and I've seen a lot of them living out where I live. So back to where we live now. I go out all the time in the woods. Like I like to research for Bigfoot, and it's I'm just in the main area for it. So this one day I'm in the woods and looking for mushrooms, but I'm also looking for other things. And there was a path, like you can almost tell a cryptid's path from a deer, because there's no deer poop, and it's kind of shuffled. I think, especially in a place where there's people, they kind of shuffle their feet back and forth so they don't leave footprints. So I'm following this path, and I'm thinking this is really cool. I mean, it's obviously not a deer. Well, all of a sudden there's this big tree laying across where it was walking, and at the very side of this tree, there were 5 toe prints, like dug underneath this tree. And then about 6 feet from that over the tree was the most perfect footprint I had ever seen in my life. And what I think it did is it didn't see that tree laying there, and it tripped. And it left the most beautiful footprint. When we lived in the city and I was feeding the raccoons, there was and I always did it at night because, like I said, you work at a farm, and usually you don't get home until nighttime. And I'm back in the woods. I got all the babies. And so I had a loop that I would make to look for mushrooms. And all of a sudden, in my headlamp was this huge white wolf. It had to be a wolf. I've never seen anything this big. And it was solid white. And it was standing there. It was like standing sideways. And it was exactly where I was going to walk. And I just stopped and I looked at it. And it was standing sideways. It had its head turned to me. And it was just looking at me. And I didn't feel any fear. I didn't feel any bad vibes or anything from it. So I just looked and I told it, it's okay. I'll just turn around and go this way. You can go on your way. And I was like kind of freaked out. I turned. I went the other way. I don't know what that was, but there's this area, like the south of this county that I live in is so full of different things. It's incredible. Like, there are so many things that go on out here. I found a habitat once where they had all these like little houses, little tree houses built, just pulled all these, and they were made of thorns, and they just put them all together and made these little ones and big ones, that they were all over the place, right back by the lake. And I know from living here and just being around, I know a lot of their areas. One night I was back where one of their areas was, and I hadn't gotten any interaction from any of them anywhere for a couple of weeks. And I was like bummed. It's like, come on, you gotta interact with me. I need to know you guys are still there. So I took my red strobe light and I went back to where the front of their area is. And of course, it's right along the lake. And I just strobed the whole area for maybe 20 minutes, back and forth, red strobe, red strobe. Well, then I got back in my truck and I drove down the road and around into where the back of their area is. And I was going to bring my owl call so I could call to him. And I walked, I was walking. I went into the woods where the back of their area is. And I'd forgotten the owl call in the truck. And there was no way I was walking back there for it. So I just started, I was in the woods behind their area. And I started going, ooh, ooh, Jeremiah. Something back in there answered me, and it wasn't like an owl thing. Something did the same thing back to me, and I would go, ooh, and it would do the same thing back. And I was floored. I had so much fun. It was the coolest experience I ever had. I thought that it was so fun because it was doing exactly the same thing I was doing. There's been a lot of other things. I mean, it's weird because I never believed in Bigfoot, or I never heard of Bigfoot. I never heard of cryptids or what they were. But I believe now. I mean, I've seen them with the eyes. And at the lake, when I saw them at the picnic area, there was another time I saw one, and I just can't remember which time that was. I'll call you back again now if I remember it. But I'd seen them like 4 times. I'd never had a close with them. And I want to so bad. I probably would have if I wouldn't have chickened out every time one was by me. But sooner or later, I really want to see one up close. I just want to have an interaction with one face to face. I know they're there. Dogman is there. There are things out there. And I really would like to have somebody or some people go with me to this little town I first lived in, to check out some of these old mines, because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them out there, and I think that's where these things stay, because there's a lot of them out. There's a lot of cryptids out there, but I don't want to go by myself. I always research by myself, and sometimes it's kind of scary.
Right. And yeah, the thing is I know you go out a lot by yourself, which is great, but you start adding in things like mines, caves. That's when you really got to be careful. And I mean, I myself, exactly. I would not recommend that, just because, man, I hate caves.
You hate what?
I don't like caves. They freak me out. too many bad things, happen, and you
Yes,
got
yes.
the creepy
I don't know
stuff
that.
in
I
there.
guess we have a lot of caves. I mean, I'm sure we do. It's like West Virginia, Ohio. We all have Pennsylvania. There's a lot of cryptid sightings because it's,
Oh yeah.
I've seen orbs. Oh, I know one other thing that happened here. So so behind my house in these woods, you would not believe the tree structures back there. It's crazy. And then it just goes to the dam. I mean, there's nothing back here. But one night I was just sitting out there, and and the deer were out. I'm sitting in my truck with my lights on and watching the deer. And it was one really big. There were 3 does, and one was really big. And then there were 2 more. They were a little bit smaller than her. But the other 2, we always put corn and apples out for them. And they're eating the 2. They're eating. Well, this big one that's a little behind them, towards the woods. She just keeps looking. She's got her ears forward, and she's looking in the woods. Then she'd eat a little, and her head would come up again. She's looking in the woods. Now, the other 2 they weren't even aware of anything, but this one was. And all of a sudden, Jeremiah, this thing came. It was almost like a cartoon. It was black. It was low to the ground. I mean, it was like down on the ground. It was pulling itself by its front legs. That's all I could tell you about it. It came out of those woods, and that deer turned, and she took off, and that thing went after her, crouched down like it was. I mean, it almost looked like its legs were wheels, like its back legs, because it was going like a cartoon. It was crazy how fast this thing was going, and it went after her, and she took off, and it was right behind her. And it was so quiet. Those other 2 deer never looked up. Once her and that thing were gone, the one deer did kind of look back in the woods. She went right back to eating. And I was like, what did I just see? What? It wasn't a coyote. It wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. So I told my husband about it, and he's he never really believed in any of this stuff. And he's like, oh, that's cool, honey. So then, like 3 days later, he came home from work and he said, I believe you. I believe what you saw. And I said, why do you believe me now? He said, because I saw them on my way to work this morning. He would leave at like 4 o'clock to go to work. And he was going down the road, and all of a sudden, a thing exactly like I described came across the road in front of him. And it was exactly like I had told him about this thing. It was low, pulling itself by its front hands, I guess, and went off, fast, just fast, so fast it was like a cartoon. And he said, I believe you. So he's a believer now in things. This area is so full of cryptids. Like all of the southern county I live in is just insane with cryptids. And I do believe in portals. I've been to hockey games and experienced some things there. We went to the Daniel Boone National Forest in Kentucky one time, stayed in a treehouse back in the woods. I'm telling you, you ought to take your wife and your kids back there. They had tree houses back in the woods around all the cliffs and everything that are so cool. But so we stayed in this tree house. And so one night I was like, I had I don't know how many beers. I don't drink beer anymore, but I had a lot of beers. And I thought, I'm going back now. The whole time we're there, I'm doing wood knocks and hoops and whatever. So I started walking towards, he had told me there's this one cliff behind us. It's straight up, but there's like a way to climb up it. And I'm like, I'm going to climb up that thing. So I'm walking. I had these green night vision goggles on, so I could see pretty good. It's like 3 a.m. And I'm walking to this thing. All of a sudden, this feeling came over me, like it stopped me in my tracks. I couldn't move any farther forward, and I just knew that I had to turn around and get out of there. And that's exactly what I did. I turned around and got out of there because whatever that was gave me a warning. You need to turn around and go. There have just been so many cool things. Like I could go on and tell you different experiences that were just so unbelievably amazing with different things that I've seen, that I've experienced. That I still want to have a face-to-face with a Sasquatch. And I think we're going to be moving out west. And it kind of bums me out because from what I understand, the Squatch out there are mean. They're not as kind. Like these guys around here are just kind of, they just like to watch people, you know. You can see their little areas at the edge of national parks and stuff where picnic tables are, where they made little holes they could like stand back in there and watch people. And the whole time they're like making tree windings and braids and all kinds of weird stuff while they're watching us. A friend of mine, it runs a podcast called, oh my God, I can't think, I can't think of it. That he runs a podcast and he has seen the Dogman. He has a Dogman he caught on camera, but he didn't see it while he was there. But when he went and looked at his film,
Oh, okay. Yep.
it's there.
If you think of it later, just let me know when you try to think of his podcast. So question for you, you know, you've had so many wild things happen. What instance do you think you felt the most, like it was the most intense, or you felt the most scared during that time?
Oh, when that thing dropped behind me from the tree.
Mm.
That probably was the most scared. Let me think. I've had some funny things. The cheesecake thing was kind of funny. I've had some things that just kind of cracked me up because they're so silly. I've had a lot of scary things. I have to say that one was probably, it was right behind me. And the thing was, is that little patch of woods had tree structures. I mean, there were tree structures everywhere. But then in the midst of these tree structures was a tree about, I'm going to say the circumference was probably 15 inches, 20 inches, about 12 feet up this tree. That tree was shredded. I mean, 3 inches into the tree for like 4 feet up. It was just in shreds. And I'm thinking, okay, something tall, like there isn't, I know that there are animals that will shred a tree, not that high up and not that deep and not that like amazing. This tree was shredded. And that's exactly where that thing dropped. And I felt that dread, like when I saw the Dogman. So I've always wondered, do Dogmen also make structures? What do you think?
Now that's an interesting thought I've never heard brought up. Even though, I mean, I haven't listened to a lot of Dogman stuff, but I guess enough. That's really interesting to think about. Usually you just hear of them potentially just messing up people, right? You never hear of them building something.
Oh, they love making you scared.
Yeah.
That smirk is incredible. Yeah, they like to make you scared, I think. But like in the midst of all these, and these structures weren't like, I mean, Sasquatch makes some pretty cool structures. They are like really amazing. Like they'll in these areas where they're watching the picnic tables behind like the ferns and stuff, that what they're doing with the trees and the ends of the limbs and the vines, like they just go crazy binding them all together, and it's really cool to see. I'll send you some pictures of them. But this tree was right in the middle of these structures they weren't that intricate, but they were big, and they were purposeful. You know what I mean? Like if it was a tree bend, there were like 4 of them bent together, you know, and it just was different than the Sasquatch. I wonder if Dogman also makes, because they kind of hang out together, don't they?
Well, there are definitely instances in parts of the U.S. where they have, you know, you've got like your land between the lakes, and then there's a few other places too where there's a population of Bigfoot that's known, and then a population of Dogman that's known too.
Right, and that friend of mine from the Boggy Creek incident, that's one of the places he researches. There's a Bigfoot community, and he and his partner have gotten to be, you know, like they kind of interact with each other. But then one night they were out there, and what they call the ones with all the sharp teeth, the face eaters, the
the Gugway.
Gugway, yeah, a Gugway came at him, and he sent me pictures. He had set up video cams, you know, game cams. He's got pictures of these things. He's got a beautiful picture of this thing biting his game cam, and it's all the teeth, and their teeth are like huge and pointed, and there's rows of, there's more than one row of them. And this thing came after them. Yeah, and like they got out with their lives. So now he carries an elephant gun. He's like in his 80s. His name is William Lunsford. Lunsford.
Okay, I know.
He loves to talk.
I know exactly who that is. Okay, gotcha.
He's an old Southern boy, and he's funny. He'll tell you stories and laugh. He's got some really good stories after all these years. He's such a nice guy. He's so sweet. He and his wife rescue dogs. And he's a fisherman. He and his partner, they go and they interact with this group of Bigfoot that are there.
I think this is it's a great first episode to get your stories down, and I appreciate you coming on. And it sounds like there's probably going to be more stuff in the future, especially if you move out to the west.
I'm in the woods at night all the time. Yeah. I go all over this park. I go other places, and I just wear a headlamp. And I take a taser, and I have a 360, which isn't going to do any good. William carries an elephant gun now. He says he'll never shoot a Sasquatch.
That's crazy.
But he sees another one of those googlies. He's going to protect himself, because he said that was the most scared he's ever been. It's also called the whistling pig.
Okay.
The whistling bear or something.
All right.
When they go in the woods, do not whistle.
Oh yeah, no, don't.
Whistling brings them in.
Don't do that. Yeah.
And when next time you take your son out, bring a red strobe light, and honest God, you'll get interaction from him.
All right. Melanie, thank you so much for coming on the show and for sitting down and sharing. Yes, I appreciate you letting me come back on. It feels so good I don't have anyone who ever believes me. So it feels so good to be able to tell somebody who understands, what I've seen and what I've experienced, and that I'm not a liar. I'm very truthful about things, and it blows my mind. I'm still like, oh, you gotta be kidding, these things are really out there. One time, I gotta tell you something else. One time, where those red eyes were coming around the tree, behind that area, I was looking for mushrooms. There's a path, and I'm standing there, and I'm looking at this tree, and all of a sudden, that samurai chatter, I heard in my left ear, this, not even a second of samurai chatter in my left ear. And I whipped my head to the left. There was nothing there. Instantly, there were 3 wood knocks across to the right, back in the woods, that were so loud. And then someone told me that the juveniles play a game with people where they'll see if they can do something and then get out there before people see them. Mm-hmm. I've heard that too.
All I'm thinking is I think that's what it had to have been, because it was loud and clear. And then, bam, it was gone. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That's wild. Yeah. Well, Melanie.
But I appreciate you letting me be on your show, Jeremiah. You're an amazing man, and I wish you and your family nothing but the best of everything.
Thank you. And please keep in touch with what happens in the future. And I know you will, Melanie.
I will, Jeremiah. Thank you again so very much.
Absolutely. Well, you have a great rest of your day, ma'am.
You also, sir. Bye-bye.
Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list. If you've had any encounters in Oregon, which I'm sure there's probably a few of you out there, please feel free to reach out immediately. You can use email bigfootsociety@gmail.com. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.